Hey, welcome back to Big Board. So, I thought now that I have 5 turns under my belt and about 30 plus combats that it might be a good time to give some initial impressions regarding Korsun Pocket 2. I've been having trouble saying that in a concise manner and pronouncing pocket correctly, so I'm very pleased so far with the video. Anyway, let's have a little talk a little bit about components, and then we can get into some of the mechanics of the game that I like, and some things that I think could be improved, and things that could need to change, or whatever the case might be. Right. So first things first, there are a number of nifty charts in the game. This one is just a simple counter information chart, but on the back it has a handy reference for the different types of movement based on unit type and whether you're in column or out of column and whether you're artillery, which leads me immediately to one of the first things that I think could be tuned up in the game, right? I think the presentation of the artillery rules has been significantly changed and refined, and they've removed all this supply need and all this sort of stuff out of the artillery rules. So you're no longer paying by the firing action. So now you have the ability to, you just can move them and shoot them. Let me just get rid of this real quickly here. Mute my phone because I'm sure someone will call while I'm on this video. Right. So artillery, and within the rules there are 3 sections that reference artillery and 2 of those sections in essence are cut and paste. They're the same wording, same terminology, talking about light, medium, heavy, self-propelled, and the impact on the gameplay with them, right? It would almost be better to me to have that all in one place. And in fact, instead of having this long summary here, provide me with a chart that says by caliber what's light, because it's not inherently obvious unless you're a gun and howitzer nut and know the difference, right? So a 150 millimeter Nebelwerfer is light. A 76 millimeter gun is light. 120 millimeter mortar is light. All makes sense, right? But heavy can includes a 170 millimeter gun, a 210 millimeter howitzer, 203, etc., 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 210 millimeter rocket. Then there's self-propelled and a whole heavy. Did I say heavy? And medium. Oh, yeah, medium. 105 millimeter howitzer, 100 millimeter howitzer. So there's some granularity here, right? And what I find, the reason why this matters, what I find is when I go to play and I go to move that artillery unit, first of all, I got to check to see what caliber it is. Does it need to be in column, and does it follow the column rules for artillery, or is it just regular column? Or is it a small unit, a company-sized unit versus a battalion-sized unit, and that changes the way that unit moves as well. And the impact on other units around it as well, because when you're in column, if you're medium, I think it is, you have a trailing counter behind you, and you take up that 2 spaces on the road versus just 1 space. No one can pass through. They can't pass through anybody else. They have to basically stop unless they go around on a road. So there's all sorts of little things there. If that was all in one place, more succinctly put, more clearly put, I think that would aid play a lot, because one of the few things I find that I stop for every turn is that a 100? Because it just has a caliber. I don't know if it's a howitzer or a gun or my mother's backside farting, right? So I have no idea. All I know is that it's a unit with a rating on it that it says 300 or 170 or 250 or 4.272225, right? So no, the nuanced and experienced and grognardy of you will know by the unit formation and by the fact that you play 4,000 East Front games, this guy is obviously, Kevin, medium weight and clearly needs to be treated this way. So that was the first thing. Now, I like the fact that in this particular battle and in this particular game, let's call it a system, right? that you do have that level of change of granularity and detail around the artillery, right? Because it's kind of cool. Not everything can just rush up to the front. Switching from, as a battalion scale size unit, switching from deployed to or in battery to in column or movement mode costs you 4 movement points. Then you get the road benefits of being in column while you move along the road, and you get that nuance there, and you're seeing the other units outstrip the artillery, and they can't keep up, and there's not a lot of roads going where you want to go, particularly with my strategy where I'm kind of doing the off-road version of Korsun the Pocket. So that's caused me more than a few challenges. Now, obviously the German planners were a lot smarter than I was, right? Let's see. I like that, and it gives it a lot of flavor. It's just a bit fiddly, and I think it could be thought through a little more, right? So now, we're still talking about components, and I jumped into the rules, right? I love these situation sheets. There are multiple of them. February 10th setup, February 1st setup. It's got all the primary roads on it, and then where the specific units are. You can see the divisions, and they're the division boundaries and all the rest of it. I think we picked up a few minor errors there, and they're getting fixed, so that's all good. Nothing to panic about. It should not be in the final product. Those are great, unless you're using a scenario that's not for one of those dates. Then you've got to make the adjustments based on what's in the scenario instructions. And so checking along with this and working out exactly where that hex is, I can see some of the older folks in the audience might go, oh man, my eyes, I can't see. Well, grab a magnifying glass. It's really not that hard. And if you can I reference things from geographical points on the map, and I go, okay, well, here's that hook in the river. It looks like it's 3 hexes from there. And quite frankly, you get near enough, it's going to be close enough with this, because the way the setup works is every little setup zone, you've either got to have a unit on it, or behind it, or in it, or have an EZOC, a ZOC on it, a zone of control on it, right? Not an EZOC. And so that's going to give you the flexibility there to cover those hexes, and it'll be okay. Now, the other thing that I really also quite like, this large format. I'm not a huge fan of the colors, but large format terrain effects chart here. Terrain identifier chart. Effects on the back, which is kind of curious to me. I would have probably put the terrain and the effects on the same side, and then weather effects are here as well, which is also very substantial and somewhat verbose, right? Mine came with a little circle around it. I think Jack must have been reading through this before he sent it to me and circled that for some reason. I don't know whether that's right or wrong there. There's a non-terrain movement point cost chart as well, which is really nice because it also has the rules reference that talks about the number of extra movement points to either enter enemy zone of control, an EZOC, or moving adjacent to a unit that's dug in. You're going to pay extra and stuff like that, right? I'm trying to see what else is here. And the terrain effects chart is broken up by frozen snow and deep mud and regular mud. On the other side, you've got the terrain effects for combat here, and then your CRT, which is pretty straightforward. It's 1 to 4 to 9 to 1. It's a 1d6. There are column shifts. There are very few DRMs. I don't believe there are any DRMs. There may be one DRM, I think. And then also on here is a little summarized sequence of play, which also has rules references on it, which is very nice. And then a fatigue effects chart, which really only comes into effect if you play the extra night turns, and that's a choice you make depending on your desire. And then there's also a visibility and supply effects chart. And I think that's probably another area where there's an added level of detail that's important to the game, but you don't appreciate it until the first handful of mud turns. Supply is a simple counting your movement rate that you have back to a road that leads to a supply source, right? And in fact, so yes, so I'm gonna leave it as that, because otherwise it gets pretty involved. I shouldn't say involved, but there's nuances. Now, there are 4 real states. There's a 5th state, but that's only for the opening turns for the Soviets. They get extra supply. There's normal supply, limited supply, cut off, and out of supply. You're in normal supply if you can meet the criteria for it. You're in limited supply if you can't. And then if you have no means of tracing at all back to a supply source, then you're cut off. And nothing really happens to you then other than you being halved or being reduced in capability for your combat until you actually are in combat, and then you're in trouble when you become out of supply. Units that are out of supply may not use arty fire, may not attack, have the defense halved. They may not use motorized movement, which means motorized units may not move at all. So you can get yourself into a pickle pretty quickly if you end up being out of supply. So I like this chart, and I like the supply rules. There's just enough of it to make you think about things, and the interplay between that and the weather is one of the things that I think gives this game a lot of flavor for the particular battle, because the mud caused all sorts of problems, and there's varying degrees of mud, deep mud and regular mud. Deep mud is going to impact impact construction, engineering efforts. And so you can build roads in this game, which is somewhat unique. And you can, with that, build new supply routes, right? Which is all part of my evil strategy as the Germans try and eke out a minor victory. So by doing that, that gives us the ability to change where the units can go and how effective they are, but you've got to do that around the weather. And I would imagine that that's perfectly reasonable within the confines of the game and the game rules. Our army commanders are looking at the weather, they're making assessments based on the situation, knowing that the weather might change in 2 or 3 days. They're going to push their assault or their offensive as far as they can, build the roads to feed the units, and then hunker down at the point when the weather is looking like it's going to change. And then they're going to go forward from there based on what the next set of forecasts are, for whether it's going to be frozen or snow or whatever the case may be, right? The LN9, so that's pretty interesting, and it gives you some nuance and some flexibility there with the game that I quite like. There's some visibility rules as well. So there's this there's the Azi Supply Surprise rule. If you're trying to sneak in between zones of control, because visibility and fog and all that sort of stuff are rampant across the map and no one can see what's going on, you may end up getting yourself into a bit of a pickle, being forced to attack the unit that you're adjacent to, number one, but then number two, you may receive a negative malus on your attack, or you might receive a positive depending on how you die roll, right? So I like that too. Now, I haven't experienced that yet. We haven't got into that stage of the game, and it's not that big a deal at the moment. Now, I guess from a context standpoint, there are a lot of counters. I think I've been saying 1,200. There's 1,400 counters. There's 4 maps. So it's a monster game, and I think if you're looking for a fast-playing monster game, this is your Huckleberry. If you're a nostalgia grognard that loved Korsun Pocket, the original one, and want to see what the new map and counters look like, and you want to have it on your shelf, you need to go get it. If you're new to wargaming and want to play a big game, this could be a good game for you. I would be wary of the rules are verbose and a little, in some cases, a little ambiguous. They require fine reading, right? Attention to detail, because it may say a unit cannot move in this period of time. Well, that doesn't mean that unit can't be put out of supply. It also doesn't mean that unit can't fight or be forced to fight if it's adjacent to an enemy unit, which is, right? The rules say what they say. those types of things are easy to miss in the rules, and there's a lot of that. Now, it's not a long rule book. It's including all the designer notes, which are fairly extensive. Oh no, actually, this is all rules. So 27, 28 pages, so pretty standard, larger font, not onerous at all to read, but you've got to pay attention to detail. So if you're if you're a new dude or dudette wanting to play a war game that's a monster that's set in the Eastern Front in atrocious weather where the Germans have no hope, this also is your huckleberry, right? I think if you're a regular war gamer, and I would call myself, I kind of lean in on the monster side of things. I do like a lot of larger games, but I think if you've been following this channel for any period of time, you know, I play pretty much everything. I'm kind of like a game hoe. I think that for me, the speed of play is one of the things that I like about it, in that I know that I can, except for the sort of the looking up the artillery stuff, that I can jump in, I can play a turn for the Germans like that, I can play a turn for the Soviets like that, and I can move on. Now that's on a one mapper. On 4 maps, there's going to be more thinking required, more work required, and I think the game will slow down substantially just because of the quantity of units and all the rest of it, right? This is kind of the juicy part with the relief action. It's pretty fun. I can see me immediately turning around and setting this back up. I'm not going to because it's taken up a lot of space in my new abode, which is limited. So we got that going on here, but we're going to finish up this gameplay. I'm going to gestate on this and come back to do another. I'll probably put it into words. I'll put a blog post up, and we'll have further conversations about what I think about the game and how the rule mechanics are working. I haven't got to the point yet where the Soviets have arrived with their reinforcements and about to, you know, smack the Germans in the mouth. So I want to see that. I want to see how the offensive capabilities of the Soviets are in this particular battle. You know, the Russians right now have a very small handful of capable units that can attack, and they're all beleaguered by the 16th and 17th Panzer right now, and in fact one of them's cut off. So we're we're yet to see how the Soviets actually play out and how they work, right? So I'm trying to give you guys a sense and a feel for this. I know that there are a lot of people that were bitching about the price as well, and I'm curious about that because I don't see anyone complaining about Thin Red Line games. It's 3 or 4 maps and 1,200 counters, and it's every bit a couple $100 or 180, right? 190. Them doing a much larger print run than these guys. I think Pacific Rim Publishing is I would call them a micro publisher. They're very small. They're not doing big runs. There probably will not be another run of this game, I don't believe, unless somebody buys the company and you know, sort of carries the legacy on. I get the impression that this will be Jack's last game. It'll also be Pacific Rim's potentially one of their last games that they publish. I'm sure they've got stock and stuff of other games, but the owner is not well. The pre-order is literally just a commitment by email. So if you want to see this thing done, I think it's incumbent upon all of us, if you want that sort of legacy stuff to be carried forward and have access to, is one of 2 games on the topic, really, right? There's Jaws of Victory and there's this. And you probably need both of them, I think. I've got Jaws of Victory. I quite like that game. This plays a lot faster than Jaws of Victory, so it's a lot more manageable. I think the scale's a little bit different as well. This is a little bit more detailed in terms of now I'm guessing. I know these are 1 mile hexes. I don't recall off the top of my head what the scale is for Jaws of Victory. Jaws of Victory is a very, very crowded map. This doesn't feel as crowded, though it is dense. There are, you know, a lot. If you've seen the photographs, there's a lot of pieces on the map, a lot of stuff going on. You're going to need your tweezers or steady hands and no fat fingers, right? So you're playing a big monster war game, and there's a lot going on. So I'd encourage you guys to go out, order it if you want to order it. Don't if you don't. I really don't care. But the gameplay experience is fun for me as a solo endeavor. I could certainly see playing the campaign if you set this up with a two to four players. A lot of epic fun. You can break this up by army fronts, right? Because that's all laid out here. So, you know, you've got these army divisions on the map that you can see where 27th Army, 52nd, the 2nd Ukraine front, 1st Ukraine front is, and you can allocate your forces and argue about reinforcements and all that sort of good stuff. So lots of good stuff within the game system, and the gameplay is fun. I guess the other thing that is kind of curious to me, and one of my original reasons for being reticent about this game is that some of the artwork and some of the notions that I had heard but not read felt like it was just a straight reprint, right? And it was really just, we're taking old crappy art and putting some lipstick on it and slapping it out. Having now gone through the counters and gone through the playing on the map, I can say that that's not the case. I feel like the art has deliberately been held in check and restrained to give it almost an SBI style feel of clean, uninterrupted, subtle artwork. The map has actually grown on me a lot as I've played with it. I like to keep my map fairly organized. It's pretty easy to do that. Some of the pictures I saw were just, you know, scattershot, you know, counters all skew whiff everywhere, and it just looked like a big cluster F, right? It's not playing out that way at all. So there's that to be thankful for. I do think the counters are a little thin. That's also a function of them being a small printer. They are not TSWW thin. I mean, you can't wave the counters around, and you know, they're not the wafer thin counters. They're more probably the Decision Games, almost as thick as Decision Games counters. So you know, they're fine. My counters, the Germans, just one sheet was just starting to get a little offset. So I think that needs to be monitored and managed when they do go to production. There was clearly some issue at some point, but all of the Russian units are fine. All the info counters are fine. They're easy punch. They have side nibs, and I saw a lot of complaints about that online as well from my photographs. And I'm like, guys, I'm zoomed in here like 10x. So yes, it looks like a massive side nib, but you cannot even literally for 95% of the counters feel the side nibs. They're visually there. They're actually kind of at the top of the counter, funnily enough, not all the way down the counter. I don't know how they do that. I'm not a printing expert, but they feel very normal. I've not had to sand down the counters or smooth them off or anything like that. And I've clipped mine. You can see that, right? So if I was going to get all OCD on my own ass, I would be sanding these down, but you don't need to do that. So from a commentary perspective, I think that it's been pretty awesome. Anyway, I think that's about it. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I look forward to catching you soon. Roll dice.